Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of GlowJob. And today we have a pretty exciting episode, and we're just going to break down the entire ecosystem of launches that have flopped.
A lot of time, money, and energy goes into a product launch. But what happens when said product launch flops?
Welcome to GlowJob, the beauty podcast that's more than skin deep. We're the only podcast to make you hotter and smarter.
So we're going to go into a couple of really specific examples of specific launches that flopped, a couple of brands that have flopped, and what can happen and what really is the cost of a flop.
So what are some of the most common reasons for a product launch failure? I would say first off is definitely a lack of strategy. So this could mean marketing strategy, product. If you don't have a solid understanding of the formulation and you're launching something, that can really fall apart pretty easily.
The second reason is poor product performance. And this really can happen when you really hype a product up with your marketing and social media. But when consumers actually get their hands on the product, it does nothing what it says it's going to do.
And piggybacking off of that, when there's too much of a focus on aesthetics and not on product performance. Sometimes brands will prioritize aesthetics and branding over what actually works for the consumer.
And the last one, and probably the most common one, is just kind of a lack of innovation or any kind of value. To be honest, I often feel that celebrity brands are the biggest culprit when it comes to this thing, because sometimes they're just like, what can my face sell? But does that product actually add any value to the consumer, anything new or novel? A lot of times it's no.
Yeah, oftentimes consumers can feel when it's a cash grab and then it gets reflected in sales. So the beauty industry is all about launching new products, whether that be skincare, makeup, hair care, fragrance, etc. Things that people are going to love. And the only way for brands to stay relevant and afloat is to continuously launch new things.
Yes, new launches are then going to, provide enough capital to do more launches and make more hires and just keep growing and growing and just kind of feeding this entire beauty industry beast. So let's jump into one of the biggest flops of 2025, and that was the Tower28 and their mineral SPF face sunscreen.
That did not go well because they touted that sunscreen as a no white cast sunscreen until the creators came back.
I know, it was really awful. So what happened was the product launched, a bunch of people bought it because they're like, oh my gosh, a sunscreen with no white cast, that's a mineral sunscreen. And then all of these videos came out of Black creators and darker skin creators applying this sunscreen, and they literally looked purple, right? They looked like Casper the Ghost. There was this awful kind of tinge to their skin where they looked sickly.
And this happened because mineral sunscreens are so hard to formulate. They're known for that notorious white cast, and the only way to get rid of that is by adding pigment, which is why you usually see mineral sunscreens as tinted formulas.
And so when they were first advertising this product, they did show creators of all skin types using it. However, they were only swatching the products on their hands. And when you do a hand swatch, you kind of get a general gist of how a product's going to perform, but you're really only using a tiny amount over a very small surface area. When you use the appropriate amount of sunscreen, you actually have to use quite a bit. A half a teaspoon is what they say, right? And so when you're using that amount on a much larger surface area, you actually get an idea of how a product performs. And in this situation, it did not fit the bill.
So the big lesson here is don't just test products on the back of your hand. You need to do full-blown testing on a product before you come out with claims such as no white cast or universal no white cast sunscreen. Yikes. Brands, especially if you're doing SPF, you need to test with the appropriate amount of product for the recommended usage. Another prominent product flop was Kylie Skin and their Walnut scrub.
This one was so bad. So, Kylie Cosmetics had been going on for a while. They had some really successful, super successful lip kits. And then they decided to get into skin. And one of the products that they made was a physical exfoliant that had real walnut shells in it. And anyone who knows anything about beauty is that walnut shells are like a really antiquated ingredient. They're super harsh on your skin. They are literally creating micro tears all over your face. And people call them out for it immediately. St. Ives had been under fire for years.
Oh, yeah.
And then Kylie just came out with this product.
The thing to me is like when we're talking about celebrities using their cachet to sell products, like Let's be real here. Do you think Kylie is really using a walnut scrub on her face? Like, I can't imagine her actually using this product. It doesn't align.
Exactly. She knows better, but she's making these products because they're a lower price point and it's kind of in line what the clientele can actually afford. But it really did a lot of damage to the entire brand, in my opinion. Kylie's Cosmetics, they'd been struggling for a while after their whole, success with the lip kits. And it's because they were coming out with products like these that don't align to the founder, that don't add any value. You know what I mean?
Totally. So the lesson here is, consumers are actually smarter than you think, and they're going to respond accordingly.
Exactly. And it really bit them in the ass. Another flop is from Becca Cosmetics because in 2020, they tried and really failed to launch a no pigment foundation.
That honestly just feels like an oxymoron to me because I'm like, what do you mean no pigment? It's a foundation.
Right?
Yeah.
So all of this happened during COVID. Big 2020 time. And there was this whole new trend of like not wearing makeup because we're all stuck at home, we're not going out. So this is basically kind of like a primer. It was a really silicone-y product and it was supposed to blur and just kind of cover any imperfections. But the ultimate response was, who the heck needs this? It's something that nobody asked for, nobody wanted, and it flopped accordingly.
Lesson here is do your homework. Nobody wanted this product, literally.
Right? I feel like a couple of consumer testing groups could have told them that, we don't need this.
And another failed product launch was the Jaclyn Hill lipstick launch in 2019.
Oh my God, she totally got raked over the coals for this. But Jaclyn Hill was like this huge, huge, huge YouTube influencer. I mean, she's still around, but she finally decided to come out and launch a line of makeup products, including these lipsticks. But immediately upon inspection, after consumers bought them, is that they were covered in things like hair.
Ew.
They had mold in them. They were just totally, absolutely disgusting.
Oh, God, honestly, that makes me feel sick.
I know they had to refund all of their clients and really just kind of shutting things down.
Lesson here is invest in quality control. Consumer health is of the utmost importance.
And I think what her main issue was is that she got all of these like gorgeous samples from the labs and from the manufacturers, and they gave her an idea of what the product was supposed to look like. But somewhere along the line really hit the fan, and that's why they had hair in the lipstick.
When it comes to things like samples, usually those are created in small batches. So it's really easy to monitor. When you go to scale and you're producing like 10,000, 20,000, however many thousands of SKUs, that's a whole different line of production. And if that facility can't handle it, like this happens.
Exactly. So this is why, Hailey Bieber, when she was getting all of that pushback for the grittiness of all of her lip peptide treatments, this is what e.l.f. kind of sold her on. When they acquired her, they're like, we actually have the proper systems in place to make sure that quality control is going to be fixed and your lip peptides will no longer feel like sand. So all of these really specific examples of like singular launches that flopped obviously can be an issue. But when you flop over and over and over again, it can lead to your entire brand flopping. So let's talk about some brands that flopped.
First up, let's talk about Youthforia because they closed in 2025, but their product flop happened in 2024. This is a clear example of when your product flop literally leads to your brand closure.
And this one was really sad because they had successfully launched so many other products before this entire foundation fiasco, but it really just goes to show how damaging a specific flop can be to your reputation.
So Youthforia launched a limited range of foundation shades. And initially they got some flack because people were like, hey, there's not enough colors for darker skin tones, et cetera, et cetera. So they came out with a darker shade. But then when they came back with the darker shade, creators who had more melanin-rich skin were testing it on their own skin and saying, hey guys, this is quite literally black paint. Like no other pigment in here besides black. And this is unacceptable for a quote unquote like inclusive shade.
And the lesson here, because we've actually talked to a lot of industry insiders that broke down exactly what happened with that black paint fiasco, was they did not take enough time to address the situation appropriately. They really just rushed as fast as possible to create darker shades out there, and they totally missed the mark. They should have consulted with more people. They should have tested on more skin tones. The community gave them a second chance to actually relaunch with more foundation colors, and they just sped through things too quickly and, really messed things up. RIP Youthforia.
Next up is Item Beauty. And this is a clear-cut example of when a celebrity brand is selling on its perceived cachet and not really like its actual products.
And in this situation, we had the biggest TikToker in the world, right? It was Addison, and she wanted to launch a makeup line. But here, it wasn't just like one specific launch that flopped. It was everything that they launched flopped. And it was really because like Addison just wasn't super aligned with the brand. She wasn't talking about it. She wasn't touting it. She really was just like slapped her face on it once to be the cover poster, got it out there and just, fingers crossed that it does well. But that's not what a founder-led brand should be. People are really expecting insight into the person, feeling connected with Addison herself. And she wasn't giving that to the people she was asking money from.
She didn't promote it once. Like literally, it was just that campaign. And I felt like I never heard about it again from her.
Right? And so it's tough. So the lesson here is that if you want to be the face of a brand, be the face of that brand. Yeah. And next, for brand flops, we got to talk about what happened with Kat Von D and KVD Beauty, because this one was rough.
And this one wasn't necessarily a product failure. It was actually the founder who said some very controversial things and brought the whole company down.
She had the golden ticket in my mind. Like they had so many amazing cult classic products with their whole what was the famous one? It was like the contour palette. That was the product of 2016, if you ask me. But she is crazy. Can we say that?
Yeah, she kind of reminds me of the Kanye arc, right? Someone who created something really awesome and then shoots themselves in the foot by saying some crazy bad things.
So she was talking all about all of these anti-Semitic things. People were accusing her of naming some of her products that had specific ties to the Nazi regime.
Yeah.
That's awful. And then she would go on all of these insane anti-vax rants. And it was really just pushing all of her consumers away to the point where the head of the companies and her investors over at Kendo Brands that owned Kat Von D, they had to come in and really just remove her. So now KVD Beauty actually no longer stands for Kat Von D Beauty. It stands for Kindness Vegan Beauty, I think.
They really took a hard left and they're like, whoa, damage control. How do we fix this?
But I don't know. At the end of the day, I think she did make a big buck out of this because she left and she was able to just, cash out and go on her crazy merry way.
And since that transaction, when Kat Von D sold her ownership, the brand has been struggling, as a lot of the companies under the Kendo brand. We even talked about this on a news roundup from a month or two ago, where LVMH is considering spinning off Kendo brands because it's just not performing the way they wanted it to. And next up is Haus Labs by Lady Gaga, but the original launch, because we're also going to talk about their relaunch, which was very successful.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget about the original Haus Labs because it launched in 2019 and it was exclusive to Amazon. And it was just a bunch of products that were really colorful and kind of for that monster Gaga aesthetic, right? A lot of graphic eyeliner. And the brand overall really did not do very strongly there. They said that the products weren't very good. And also it was just kind of kitschy stage makeup, if that makes sense. How many times are you going to need to do, some type of crazy green cut crease?
Totally. So the consumers were not gravitating towards the product. That led to lukewarm reviews, unimpressive sales, and ultimately that led to their total rebrand and relaunch in 2022.
They literally wiped the entire slate clean and then came back and they did such a better job. There needs to be case studies done on how this rebrand went. I think Haus Labs and Fleur with Chriselle Lim, they definitely take the cake. But the second time around, they had their iconic foundation, they had their concealer, all these blushes. Lady Gaga was a lot more involved. And I guess they might be on Amazon, but they're definitely a Sephora brand now. So I think version 1 was kind of the stage makeup that you would wear to a Lady Gaga concert. And version 2 is the kind of Lady Gaga makeup that you can wear every day. Mm-hmm. And it's still doing pretty well.
And so the lesson here is star power is not always enough. The product and the brand has to match the persona behind it, aka Lady Gaga.
And now we have the last line that totally flopped, but we got to talk about what happened to Kim Kardashian and Skin.
And this is not the first beauty foray that Miss Kim Kardashian has gone into. Obviously, there was KKW Beauty, which she had to rebrand after she got divorced from Kanye. And then she launches, yes, that was a whole thing. Then she launches Skin. And part of the reason why this brand flopped so bad was, one, it was an outrageous price point considering the demographic of the fan base and consumer that loves Kim. All in, this entire skincare line would cost you over $600. That's unattainable for most consumers.
And so the launch flopped pretty hard. All of the products, again, bad sales, bad reviews. But Kim didn't close it down entirely. What she ended up doing was taking Skin and then making it a part of Skims, which makes so much more sense for her. They are evaluating Skims to be $5 billion nowadays. And it's really because it's a lot more in line with who Kim Kardashian is. She's all about the body, and Skims is all about the body. So we're really excited to see what they are going to do with Skin now that it's a part of Skims. So, hopefully third time's the charm, right? There's KKW Beauty, Skim, now Skins.
And she's really trying to position Skims Beauty for success. She has the Ame Coli founder, Diara, as the VP of Beauty within Skims. So I think, there's potential here that third time is the charm.
I think she's got it. And she's got $5 billion to help make this successful. So the lesson here is that even celebrity founded brands, they really need to align with cultural context and consumer mood.
So now that we've run through the examples, let's break down how much a flop can actually cost a company.
And we're going to provide some ranges here, starting from like lower, smaller size brands to the really big conglomerates. But let's just start off with the basics of the financial costs.
So first up, let's talk about development and production costs. So what does that mean? That's R&D, that's testing, that's packaging, and that is manufacturing. So this easily is between $100,000 to $500,000 for indie brands. So think on the smaller end. And this can be millions for middle market and bigger brands.
And next we have marketing flops because marketing is so expensive in the beauty space. And next we got to break down some of the marketing and launch costs just associated with these things. But it's a lot. You have your campaigns, you have PR, you have press, you have influencers, you have events that you got to put together.
Yes.
So many things go into this. Even just like the shipping costs of shipping off those giant PR mailers to all the big influencers out there. But the band here is that on the smaller end, it can be $50,000 when it comes to launching and marketing it successfully, all the way up to $2 million plus.
I mean, we saw when The Ordinary did that pop-up where they were talking about all the money they saved their consumers by not doing influencer marketing. And they literally showed a room. If you guys hadn't seen it before, it was a pop-up shop in New York City, downtown Manhattan. And it was a room full of cash. And I think it was between $2 million to $3 million in cash that they saved from influencer marketing. So that's just one example right there.
100%. If you think about the biggest influencers today, like an Alex Earl, and she can command multiple six figures for one stinking post, right? So if you hire Alex Earl a bunch of times or hire 10 Alex Earls, that's $1 million right there.
Other costs that can crop up when a product fails during a launch includes recalls or reformulations. So if that product was unsafe or didn't perform well or had any sort of concerns, you have to start from scratch, and that is very expensive.
So here we're kind of talking about specifically the Tower28. And the last one that we have is just inventory waste. And this one is really tricky. In the industry, they call it dead stock. So what this would mean is just kind of all those Jaclyn Hill lipsticks with all the mold and all the hairs in them. What are you going to do with them? It's just trash that you have to throw away.
And there are also a lot of hidden costs that apply to all of these failed product launches. And so we're talking about product liability insurance. That's a bummer.
There's also things like returns, refunds, logistic issues,
FDA or EU registration fees, depending on the claims.
And not even a hidden fee, but just a major one. It's just the reputation of your brand, right? It's hard to quantify what that value is. If you lose consumer trust, that is going to be almost impossible to win back, right? What's that famous saying? Trust is built in years and years over time, but can be lost in a minute. You know what I mean?
So applicable. To wrap things up, a failed launch can cost anywhere from hundreds of thousands, if not to millions and millions of dollars to a brand. But the bigger hit here is to the brand's reputation.
And all of the really smart brands in these situations, they're going to be doing three things. They're going to really hop on with damage control really quickly. They're going to start soliciting feedback immediately, and they're going to pivot transparently. They don't want to lose that really crucial trust.
But as evidence in our examples, if a brand mishandles the blowback, they're going to lose consumer trust permanently.
It's really rough out there. I mean, even today, there are so many new brands popping up. And trust me, they want to take your spot. You know what I mean? So if you don't deal with it well, it's going to be a quick buy.
You guys, if we missed a consumer flop, be sure to let us know in the comments below.
Thank you so much for joining. We hope you learned something today, but please stay tuned next week. We'll be back on Monday for another news roundup.
And we're here every Thursday for our chit chat episodes.
Bye.
Bye.